You've probably heard that breastfed babies get sick less often or just have fewer health issues. We are here to say that actually formula-fed babies have more health issues, and breastfed babies are sort of the baseline, the norm, right. Okay? This isn't a video hating on formula. It's a video about education and letting you know what you need to know about breast milk versus formula for women who have the option and aren't really sure what they want to do, okay? We're just gonna be real with you here. I'm Rachel from the Mighty Mama Movement, a mother of 8.
And I'm Heather, a midwife and family nurse practitioner and board certified lactation consultant. So let's reframe normal. We have taken it in this world, right, that formula is normal and breastfeeding is, or breast milk, is the extra, you know, giving it that boost. When in reality, breastfeeding is normal and formula is the addition, is the
different.
Right, is not the biologically normal. And formula companies have done this because if they can make you think formula feeding is normal and that if you breastfeed, you'll just have some additional perks, then that doesn't make formula look bad.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so what we're going to talk about today is breastfeeding is the normal. So the most important thing is to feed your baby. You know, you definitely, you've just got to feed baby. And there's a time and a place for formula. I look at formula as more of a medicine than I would a staple. It should be used for those times when we can't breastfeed or we can't get milk donation. We have to look at it as the supplement in that way, that it is in addition to breastfeeding to help the baby that is
yeah, that's a really good way to look at it. So let me just point out, both of us have formula fed some of our babies. I breastfed all of my babies, but some of them I had to start, 2 of them I started formula feeding before would have been an ideal weaning time.
Right.
And we won't go into the whole story about that, but like I always have women who I know who for whatever reason are formula feeding their baby. They want to like immediately justify to me and explain why they're doing formula feeding and all this. I'm like, I am not judging you.
Right.
Like that is totally fine if you're, you know, formula feeding your baby, even if that's just because you didn't want to breastfeed. You just didn't feel like it. Okay. Right. Totally fine. But like we said, you got to be educated, and if this is just a random choice you're making, right, you need to know this, okay?
And breastfeeding can be hard. That's why we have an entire course, not a class, a course on breastfeeding. Because for me, I became an international board certified lactation consultant because I had such difficulty breastfeeding my first 2 children, and I couldn't get the help that I needed to figure out breastfeeding, that I was bound and determined that my 3rd and 4th children, I would breastfeed exclusively. And I did. And I had so much milk that I ended up donating. And that was really, really important to me because even though my children needed formula because we couldn't figure out breastfeeding because of the lack of help. I wish we'd have had our class that we have now, right? When I was having them. But that doesn't mean just because they needed it, that doesn't mean the risks disappeared. Even though they needed it, the risks were still there. My first child, I dealt with chronic ear infections with him to the point that he has permanent hearing loss from those ear infections, where my breastfed children, I don't think they've ever had an ear infection, ever.
Yeah, and that has not been an issue that I've had to deal with.
Right. And so it doesn't mean that breastfed children will never get an ear infection, but formula-fed children have, I believe, is it a 3 times greater chance that they will have problems with ear infections.
Okay, I had 8 babies. 1 of them got ear infections around the time she was 4. Okay. I haven't had any other ear infections with my children besides this one daughter, and we found out that she had an issue absorbing vitamin C and vitamin A, and that's really what caused it. So
right. And so it does make a difference. When I have women that say, hey, how long should I continue breastfeeding for? I'm losing my milk. Is it even worth it? And I'm like, even 1 or 2 feedings a day are worth it.
Can I say something about that? So I told you I didn't breastfeed all of my babies long. 2 of them I just had issues with. One of them, it was the worst. It was just struggle. He had GERD, which is like an acid reflux, caused a lot of pain. He screamed all the time. He hated to breastfeed because he associated that with the pain, because he would throw up or spit up all of the milk, and that would bring up the acid and it would hurt. It was just a big issue. And so for months I was, pumping, having to supplement with formula and just struggling. And then when finally the GERD resolved and it was no longer an issue, I kept thinking I just had to push through until then, and then he'd be fine with breastfeeding. But he just had this negative experience with breastfeeding from early on, and it was still a struggle. And so I finally just one day, out of the blue, I was just like, I'm done. I'm so done trying to dealing with pumping and all of this. We're just going to formula. That's fine. That was my mental space at the time. But you know what? If I'd been more educated about this at that time, I wouldn't have quite made that decision. What I would have done, with the knowledge I have now, I would have continued breastfeeding him at night, because he didn't have an issue with that. Like, he'd be sleepy, and so he just always was fine breastfeeding at night. And then during the day, I would have been like, yeah, I'm not dealing with this during the day anymore, and I'm not going to be pumping all day long and dealing with all of that. Because breast milk becomes more concentrated when the baby is breastfeeding less often, and he still could have gotten a ton of benefits from breastfeeding only at night, and I wouldn't have dealt with all the emotional struggle and issue during the day. So if I could go back in time, I would have made that change. And that's, again, why we're talking about this. We want you to not make the same mistakes that we made.
Exactly.
Quick side note, if you are pregnant and you want to get that baby out with less pain, listen to this. I'm a mama of 8, and my first 3 births were excruciating. I honestly thought unbearable pain was just part of the deal. But everything changed with my 4th baby when Heather, the same midwife and nurse practitioner you see in these videos, taught me a completely different way to handle labor. I had never heard anything like it, and I ended up dilating to 10 centimeters with 0 pain. After 8 babies, I can tell you this method works. Most mamas never learn these strategies, though. Even if they want to avoid an epidural, they worry they won't be able to. That was me. I had done tons of research, but I never found a real method that actually worked, just scattered tips. After learning this, I never considered an epidural again. That's why Heather and I started teaching this, because birth does not have to feel like torture. Our 10-step practically pain-free birth method has helped so many women, like Mumina, who said that her twin birth was way less painful than her first singleton birth because she used this method. If you're curious, click the link below and save your spot in our free online class, How to Give Birth with Practically No Pain.
And that goes with me. I didn't lose my milk with my first baby. We were having so many problems. And as odd as this sounds, for some reason, I didn't realize that I could pump and give my baby the milk through the bottle. And looking back now, if I would have realized the risks of formula feeding, I would have been and realized that I could have pumped and given him so much of my milk through the bottle, I would have done it. It just was not explained to me. And we're totally dating ourselves here. Because you guys, the internet was not what it is now. So you can't say, well, you could have looked at the internet. Sorry, that wasn't a possibility.
I didn't even think about it. I was just like, I'm sick of this.
Yep.
It can't be that big of a deal, And it wasn't, to be honest, it wasn't. My son is healthy. He's a teenager now, this boy. Like, it's okay. The world continued.
Exactly.
But still, if I'd known what I know now, I would have done things differently.
Yes. And my second baby was the same thing. I was slowly losing my milk, and I tried, but he was breastfeeding a couple times a day. And I was like, I'm just going to see if he asks for it or if he's happy with the bottle. And knowing what I know now, I would have kept up with those 1 or 2 times a day, because within 3 days of me weaning him, he ended up getting eczema, and we fought with eczema for years as a toddler with him, as a baby and a toddler, and that little bit of breast milk kept the eczema at bay.
That's interesting.
And so So what we're going to do is go through the risks of formula feeding, because even if you need to formula feed, you still need to know the risks so that you can look out for them.
Just
you can
like
watch for them.
Even if you need chemotherapy,
right,
you're going to do it right to save your life. But doesn't mean it doesn't have negative side effects, unfortunately. But no one's going to be like, oh, well, actually, some people do choose not to chemotherapy, depending on the stage of your life and whatever. But most people will say it's worth it, right?
Right.
And I'm not saying the formula is anywhere near the same risk as chemotherapy.
But it's just
an analogy, okay?
Exactly. If you need a C-section, you truly need a C-section. That doesn't mean the risks of a C-section for that birth and that postpartum and future pregnancies disappear. You still have all those risks, but it may make the difference between you saying, do I want to schedule one for convenience, or do I want to go through labor and have a baby vaginally? That's what we're saying here, okay? So let's talk about different statistics that are out there. So the risk for ear infections. So the risk for ear infections is 2.4 times higher, or 2.4 times more increase in ear infections in the formula-fed baby compared to the breastfed baby. Gastroenteritis is 3 times higher risk in the baby. That is why, and neck is 6 to 10 times higher, right? Mm-hmm. And neck, or necrotizing enterocolitis, it's kind of a hard one for me to say, that is very common in premature babies, like the 28-weekers, the 30-weekers, those really early babies. And that is why they use donated breast milk so many times in NICUs, because they found that the risk of neck goes down, or I should say the risk of neck increases with their formula-fed babies compared to their breastfed babies. Whether it's mom's breast milk or donated breast milk, they have a much, much lower chance and a much higher chance of it with the formula-fed babies. The chances of your baby getting hospitalized from RSV are 3.9 times higher with a formula-fed baby. So here's my little story. My nephew, when he was just a couple months old, rubella was going through the community that he lived in. And so my sister knew that was happening, and she called the pediatricians, their hotline, and she said, I think my baby has rubella. Of course, the nurse asked her the questions to figure out if it was rubella, because they don't want to have you bring in a contagious baby to the pediatrician's office. And so they said, yes, this sounds like rubella. And they said, we have one really important question for you. Is your baby breastfed or formula fed? And she said, it's breastfed. You know, my son is breastfed. And they said, great, keep breastfeeding him. Look for these warning signs, but chances are everything's going to be okay. And she said, what would have happened if I would have said my baby was formula fed? And they said, we would have had you go straight to the hospital and we would have admitted him. Because for rubella, the formula-fed baby, they said it's an almost guaranteed hospital stay. It's not a good thing. But since he was breastfed, that risk was substantially lower, and they said your baby's going to be just fine.
Or at least lower risk, so you can keep him at home and keep an eye before taking action.
Exactly. Yeah. And so they said every formula-fed baby we've had that has come down with this, we've had to admit to the hospital. And every breastfed baby, they've been able to be monitored from home. And that is really, really important. The other thing, and this goes into immunology, but how we pass it on, and we've talked about this a little bit, that if a woman is immunized, she actually doesn't pass that through her breast milk. But if she had the disease, chickenpox, measles, rubella, whatever, naturally, she has those antibodies that will pass through the breast milk and give baby a partial immunity.
It says though the baby had it and they have the...
Exactly.
And that's just while they're breastfeeding?
Just while they're breastfeeding. So if they get it after, if they're exposed after breastfeeding, those benefits aren't there. But they do hang around for a little while. And so that is that to me is a very important story of the risks of formula feeding. And so once again, if you have to do it, we're going to say this over and over, it's fine. You just need to understand that there are certain exposures. It's the same with, being in the sun. It doesn't mean because, you're not going to get sunburned, you can. You still have to wear protective clothing. You still have to do these things if you live in an area that has a lot of sun,
Right.
So we're just saying you need the education, because for those who are on the fence between breastfeeding and formula feeding, or those who are having to do a little bit of formula feeding to supplement and are like, is breastfeeding worth it? Yes, it's absolutely worth it. And Rachel and I wish we would have known those benefits, because we would have kept going. But the formula world has done such a good job in making formula the normal that we don't see breastfeeding as a normal, and that's what we should be seeing.
This is so anecdotal and not based in research, but I would just share. I did that with my oldest son. My milk supply started going down. He was about 10 months. I didn't want to deal with it anymore. So I was like, well, he would take a bottle. He liked the bottle. So I thought, I think I'll just be done right now. Whereas, like you said, I could have just kept feeding him the times of day that I did have enough milk and it would be fine. I would just feed him. It wouldn't always be enough, so I'd give him some formula, which, by the way, is kind of dooming you on a downward cycle of having less and less milk. But I didn't really care. I was already 10 months old. But again, if I could go back in time, I would have kept breastfeeding what I could for longer. Totally anecdotal, but I have 8 children, and this one son gets sick so much more often than all of my other kids. My other kids rarely do get sick. I can't 100% say it's because I breastfed them for extensive, for a decent amount of time. I don't know what it is. There's other factors. Obviously, we eat healthy, we exercise, we wash our hands, all of that. But he does all the same environment as my kids, and he does get sick a lot more often. I'm not going to say it's exactly because he didn't breastfeed as long. I mean, 10 months is a decent amount of time. It's not ideal, but decent. But still, it makes me wonder if I should have just kept breastfeeding him a little bit longer.
Oh, yeah.
Because I still had some milk. It wasn't like I had no milk. It was just kind of tired of supplementing after every feeding.
Right. Well, in the American Academy of Pediatrics, they recommend breastfeeding for 1 year, and then as long as kind of is mutually agreeable between mom and child, okay? But the World Health Organization, they recommend 2 years and longer because it has such protective qualities to babies. Another example I have is when my oldest son, he started kindergarten just after I had my 3rd child. And that was the one that I'd figured out breastfeeding. I had tons of milk and donated it. And when he brought chicken pox home from kindergarten, my husband really wanted the boys, wanted everybody to get the chicken pox. Get it over with, right. And so he was like, don't give the boys any pumped breast milk, because
did you do that?
Because we just put it in
I did it sometimes with my toddlers too. I'm like, I've got this milk and I don't want to waste it.
Exactly.
They couldn't tell.
Because I had way more milk than my daughter could ever eat. And so he was like, and I would store it in the fridge, and sometimes the boys would go in, they were little, and they would take some breast milk, and I was like, it's fine, guys. You didn't have much breast milk. So I actually wanted to give them that extra breast milk because they didn't get it. They were my 2 that had so much formula. And my husband said, don't give them any breast milk. We got to make sure they get the chicken pox and get immunity from it. And so I was like, okay. And my poor son's got it so badly, the chicken pox. And my husband goes, you should have given him the breast milk. Because I was passing those antibodies on. Well, my daughter, who was breastfeeding, and she was 5 months old maybe, she got a couple of pox on her body, and she got them on her face where she was constantly smashed into my breast, that humidity. But because she was breastfeeding the whole time, that's all she got of the chicken pox, was probably less than 10 pox on her whole body. And my poor sons, like I said, they got it so badly. They were fine, no damage done. But my husband's like, okay.
Yeah, and listen, in this video, we're not going to go into every single benefit of breastfeeding. Like mostly we've been focusing on immune support and all that, but there's a lot of other benefits to doing breastfeeding. It affects brain development. It helps babies get, if mom's consuming healthy fat, it helps baby get all those healthy fats that they need in there for brain and cardiovascular development. There's a lot of benefits, which we're not going to go over every single one, but I just wanted to point that out.
Formula just tries to mimic them. It can't do it 100%. It just tries to do the nutrients the best they can.
And breast milk is also adaptive. That's one of the things that's so incredible about it. It adapts to your baby's age. It adapts to growth spurts. It adapts to how much you're breastfeeding. Like I said, if you start feeding less, it adapts to that.
Right.
Like it's pretty incredible. Whereas formula, you're giving them the same thing every day.
Different flavors.
Yeah.
So it can affect diet later in life, food preferences, because the baby has experienced more flavors, where formula is the exact same flavor every single time.
It adapts if your baby's sick. It will have more antibodies. Like just so many things that formula cannot compare with. Now, it's great that formula exists. Imagine living back in the day when they didn't have formula and they would sometimes need it. Just like we were saying, it's great for a whole lot of other medical interventions that you would rather avoid. But if you do need them, that's wonderful. And we're so grateful for it because it has advanced and it's pretty decent. But there's no way that humans can make something in a lab that is the same as breast milk. It's just not something that we will ever accomplish.
One thing I want to point out is breast milk is meant for human babies. And so I've had a few people that have come in for well child checks and stuff into our office. And they're like, I was having problems breastfeeding, so I didn't want to go to formula, so I went to cow's milk or I went to goat milk. Please don't do that. Cow's milk is meant for cows. Goat milk is meant for goats. It's meant for those babies, okay? And it doesn't have all the nutrients that a human brain needs. And so yes, formula is cow's milk based, and you can make your own if you desire to do that. And you can make it out of goat's milk, and there's goat milk formulas that are store-bought, commercial, and you can do homemade. But you must add nutrients. So I really want to caution under a year of age, giving straight cow's milk or straight goat's milk. It's not meant for human babies. It doesn't have the nutrients, and it can be hard on the baby's body because of the different sodium contents and stuff. So if you decide to make your own formulas, definitely research it, make sure the correct nutrients are in there. We're not going to tell you about that. That's kind of on you to do that. But please, 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 under a year of age, no straight goat's milk, no straight cow's milk.
Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit about long-term effects of formula feeding instead of breastfeeding.
Okay. So with formula feeding, you don't have a lot of the natural hormones that are in breast milk. So the hormone that helps us say, hey, I'm full, you can stop eating now, you're going to get that in breast milk. You're not going to get that in formula. And so have you ever tried to force feed one of your breastfed babies? Have you ever tried to force breastfeed them?
You can't.
Yeah, you just can't.
They have to do it.
Exactly. Now, how about one of your formula-fed babies? Can you say, okay, there's just 2 ounces, there's just an ounce.
There's just a little bit more, come on, finish it up. Kind of jiggle it into their mouth, and then they're like, oh, okay, I'll drink a little bit more.
Right. So, and that's because that hormone isn't there to shut it off. Where the breastfed baby will eat, and once they're full, there is no giving that baby anything more. They're like,
which is so annoying when you need to go somewhere, and you're like, come on, eat now.
Right.
But my babies,
or
a lot of them wouldn't take bottles.
Engorged. You're like, please just drain my breast a little bit.
I need some milk out of here,
And so that sets the stage for obesity because we can't turn off our hunger cues as easily. And that is one of the risks of formula feeding is you have to look at, you're going to have a typically, not 100%, a pickier eater because they didn't get different flavors that they got through the breast milk, and they're not going to have that satiated feeling as easily and know to turn it off, because we were constantly saying, and let's admit it, we all did it. Just finish that last little bit, that last little bit. Come on, just finish the bottle, just finish the bottle. And so instead of saying, I am eating till I'm full, you're eating to finish the plate.
Right.
So, and so to them, being full is being stuffed, not just
they don't learn
satiated.
to just regulate what it's like you're overriding their natural appetite regulation.
Allergies is another one that you're going to have typically increased allergies, just a lot of more illnesses typically in the formula fed baby compared to the breast milk fed baby. And so it's important that we look at those things so that we can be aware of them and we can recognize them if we've had to formula feed our baby. And it just bothers me that they say, oh, well, there's a reduced risk. Like it's normal for every child to get an ear infection. It's not normal. It's not normal for a child to have eczema. What's not normal is the child getting eczema. It's not normal to get ear infections. And that's the way we need to reframe that and remember that when we're comparing breast milk and formula.
Okay. Something that we need to touch on is SIDS. This is something that nobody, I think, really wants to be very open about and admit. So let's talk about it. Is there a difference in the risk for SIDS with a formula-fed baby versus a breastfed baby?
Yeah, it's about 2 times higher.
That's a lot when you're talking about a baby dying.
Right. And part of that is so babies, their automatic system is not fully developed. Okay. So you know how we breathe when we are sleeping, we don't have to think about breathing. We can think about it, but we don't have to think about it. But that's not fully developed in a baby. And SIDS peaks usually around 3 months. Well, the breastfed baby is waking up about every hour and a half to 2 hours because breast milk digests in 90 minutes. So they're waking up and feeding more often. Where the formula-fed baby, formula digests in 2+ hours. So that baby is typically waking up at night about every 3 hours, every 2 to 3 hours to breastfeed. And honestly, it's closer to about 3 hours. To bottle feeding, yes. Yeah. And so that longer gap, baby's going to fall into a deeper sleep.
Which sounds very desirable.
It does.
The way that you're describing that.
And that's why when people are like, I got my baby to sleep through the night at 2 or 3 months, I'm like, oh my gosh, no. Like keep that baby going because their central nervous system is not completely developed yet. They can still go into that deep, deep sleep and stop breathing.
Okay, I'm really glad you're explaining that. I know someone who at about 2 or 3 months starts putting some cereal in her baby's bottle right before bed for the reason that it keeps them satiated or full for longer and they don't wake up hardly at all. And again, that sounds like, oh, perfect. That's exactly what I need. I need my baby to sleep longer at night. But unfortunately, that increases the risk of SIDS, which is definitely not worth getting some extra sleep.
And putting rice cereal, which is just calories. There's no nutrition in it whatsoever. They do have to put some fortified vitamins in it because they can't give a baby zero nutrition. And so I'm not particularly fond of fortified calories because they're doing folic acid instead of folate and synthetic vitamins. And I just, we have other videos about that. But you're disrupting the gut microbiome. So that's why a few years ago, might have been a little longer than a few years, formula manufacturers started putting probiotics in formula because that gut balance is there with breast milk. But one bottle of formula disrupts the gut, and it can take 6 months for the gut to heal from that one bottle of formula. And so they had to add probiotics to it to help with the balancing of the gut. And what it does is it opens up the gut and it causes that microscopic so that the gut lining isn't protected. And that's why formula-fed babies have a higher rate of allergies and eczema and all of these things, because that protective gut barrier has been disrupted. Where breast milk doesn't disrupt it, it actually guards that gut barrier as the baby is finishing developing. Okay. So think celiac. Celiac is a really good explanation of that. Leaky gut syndrome, that where it's the body can't absorb the vitamins as well, and it is more prone to inflammation. And that's what formula does. And part of that is because, you know, you're dealing with cow's milk as their base. But yeah, so there's a lot of research and behind this that, once again, even if it's necessary, that doesn't mean the risks aren't there.
Yeah. So what about with SIDS, if we do have mamas watching who do need to formula feed or are deciding to formula feed? Right. What can they do to reduce the risk of SIDS? I mean, obviously, most of us don't have babies dying of SIDS, but they do, unfortunately.
Right. And it's not the only reason.
Right,
There's
yeah.
multiple reasons.
We're talking about increased risk here.
Right.
Not like a guaranteed thing, obviously, because we're going to have a lot of women say, well, I formula fed my oldest baby and he never died of SIDS. Well,
exactly.
Good.
That's
glad. What we're hoping for.
Exactly.
But is there something to do, if it increased the risk, is there something they can do to mitigate that a little bit?
So I really would set a schedule, like wake up if baby's not waking up to feed them, you know, about every 3 hours. Now that doesn't mean they're drinking 4 ounces or 8 ounces, but I would have baby that way. Now, Dr. Sears did a lot of very interesting research. There's a few Dr. Sears because he had 8 children and a couple of his children became doctors. Yeah. So they've kind of carried on the legacy of Dr. Sears. But the original Dr. Sears, he writes some wonderful, fascinating books. And he did a lot of, I guess you could say, experiments on his wife and children. So what he did is he took, with one of his children, they had the baby sleep in another room, and he monitored the baby and the mom to see what their breathing, their heart rhythms, the wake and sleep cycles, and that whole thing. And then he put the monitor, he put it so that the baby could hear mom. And then he monitored the baby's sleep patterns, the rhythm and everything. And he found that when the baby slept in the other room and he had monitors going both ways, the mom and baby would sync together. And then he put them in the room with them, but not sleeping with mom. And then he had them sleeping in their bed and monitored to see what happened. And he said, if you are going to have baby sleep in another room, put 2 monitors so it goes both ways, because mom and baby will sync up together with the breathing and their heart rate and the sleep cycles. Yeah. And so if you're formula feeding, you definitely want to make sure that baby can hear you, you know. Okay. I am definitely an advocate for sleeping in the same room as baby, or even the same bed as baby, you know, depending on the risk factors, not smoking, and, you know, that's a whole other topic that we can go over. Yeah. But because of that syncing and being able to listen for baby and be aware. But having a baby sleep through the night is usually not a good thing that young. I mean, it's great for our sanity. Yeah, but it's not lovely. Very good for baby.
Okay, that's important to know. So to wrap up, the main point that we're trying to make here, we've made a lot of other smaller important points, I think, is that breastfeeding isn't giving your baby an advantage. It's avoiding risks that they would have if they do formula feeding. We just want to kind of reframe how we're thinking about this, because that can have a big impact on your decisions to breastfeed at all, or how long you breastfeed, or how much you supplement and all of that. Exactly. We do have a birth course if you're still pregnant. We also have a breastfeeding course if you're still pregnant. The birth course we have is free, so check that out, and we'll put some other breastfeeding, a link to a breastfeeding course that we have. You need to learn how to breastfeed. Unfortunately, it's not just, my sister, one of them had a hard time breastfeeding, and she just said, I've just seen everyone else breastfeeding and it didn't look hard. I thought it would just be easy, but it wasn't easy, and she struggled and had a really hard time with it. If you've never breastfed before, you definitely want to learn. If you breastfed before and it was painful and unpleasant, you also want to learn. So check those links out.